All right, and we're back for another virtual town hall series with the African American Leadership Forum. My name is Brittany L. Wright with Insight News, and it is my honor and pleasure to be in virtual space with all of you, reflecting on the election that has taken place last night, and that's really still going because we're still waiting for results to come in. Before we get started and I introduce today's panelists, I want to give a very special thank you to all of the people who come together to make this town hall possible. So first, I want to give a very special thank you to our sponsors, which include the Minneapolis Foundation, North Point Health and Wellness, as well as Children's Minnesota for making this town hall possible. And I also want to say thank you to our partner organizations who come together to help produce this town hall. That includes North Point, Children's Minnesota, Insight News, the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder, and Minnesota Community Care. This town hall is going to be recapping the 2020 election, preparing our community for the next 4 years through policy, political accountability, as well as through community action. It's our hope that attendees will learn how to continue to let their voices be heard through a series of calls to action, and that we can remain joyful and optimistic in this moment, even with the results of the election still in the wind, still undeclared. So hopefully we'll have some more answers on which way our country is going to go by the end of this 90-minute conversation. But if not, we'll continue to update and strategize either way. On today's panel, I'm joined by Miss Adriene Thornton, who is a nurse and infection preventionist with Children's Minnesota. Welcome back, Adriene.
Thank you for having me back.
Our next guest is Linda Sloan, who is the Executive Director for the Council for Minnesotans of African Heritage. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And joining us again is Brett Buckner, who is the Managing Director of OneMinnesota.org and the Advisory Board Chair for Minnesota Common Cause. Welcome back. Oh, you're muted. Still muted.
And
there you go.
Those buttons. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, what is time at this point, right?
I couldn't tell you right now.
And also joining us to hopefully ground us and give us some understanding of what to do moving forward is my brother, Ron Harris, who is an executive committee member for the DNC. Welcome, Ron.
Hey, sis. Good to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Glad to have you. Glad to have all of you. So as you all know, of course, we're talking about the election today, but this virtual town hall always centers COVID-19 because we are still in the middle of a global pandemic. In fact, it's the pandemic that has made this election season so unprecedented because people have had to figure out how to vote and stand in long lines and to not catch COVID and to social distance. And so many people mailed in their ballots that traditionally wouldn't have done so. And that's not for no reason. How are the COVID numbers looking, Adriene?
Well, that's a loaded question. Right now, today, they are not looking good at all. In the U.S., we are over 9 million cases. That is entirely too many cases for a virus that we can stop transmission for. We are over 230,000 deaths. That is 230,000 people that cannot wait for the election results, don't get to celebrate the election results with their family, don't get to celebrate birthdays and holidays and provide money and food for their families. That is a lot of people, and that's for all of the U.S. Minnesota is doing pretty bad right now. I'm just going to be honest. We were doing good for a while, and we have now swung the pendulum all the way back, and we're seeing numbers very comparable to what we were seeing in April and May when the pandemic really hit Minnesota. So as of this morning, we're up to 429,000 cases, and that's not cases, that's Minneapolis, I'm sorry. We're up to 157,000 cases, and that is about half of the population of St. Paul. So St. Paul has about 300,000 people. So about half of the population. So just think, if you're walking through St. Paul, half of the people that you see have now developed COVID. That is a lot of people. And in terms of deaths, there are over 2,000 deaths. That is a lot of deaths. That's 2,000 people just in Minnesota alone that are no longer here with us. And they died for no reason. That is the hardest thing to comprehend is they did not have to die. There is a way to prevent this from spreading, and we are not doing our part. We are seeing upwards of over 3,000 new cases daily. 3,000 new COVID cases daily. And people keep saying, oh, well, we're testing more. And if you test more, you're going to see more. That's true. However, you can't look at it that way. The state looks at how many tests we're doing and the percent of those tests that are positive. Our percent positive doubled over the last 7 days. That is a lot of positive cases that could have been prevented. So just because we're testing more, that is not impacting the numbers as much as people think that it is. We are seeing more cases because there are more cases out there. That is the problem. We are not doing our part to stop the transmission. That is a problem. And people are not working with the health department. That is another problem. So what we're hearing is that when the health department calls to do their contact tracing, people either hang up, they don't want to give them full information, and they really need to know who you've been in contact with during those days prior to testing or symptom onset, because if we can get other people to go into quarantine earlier, we can stop transmission of this disease. But because people are not willingly working with the health department, that is posing more problems, and that is why we're seeing so many more cases. And so if you look at the United States, CDC has everyone categorized in 5 different categories in terms of how much COVID they have in their state. Minnesota is in the 4th highest category. Our surrounding states, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, South Dakota, North Dakota, they are in the highest category. So that means as we're crossing borders, as we're going to bars and having dinner with our neighbors to the north and the south and the east, we are getting more COVID from there, and we're bringing it back here, and we're just spreading it like wildfire. And what the health department has found is that a lot of the cases are stemming from bars and restaurants. People going there, getting exposed, and then developing the disease. And that's a big problem, because what we're finding is, in addition to our hospital beds getting full and our ICU beds getting full, we are starting to run out of healthcare workers to take care of people. They're either in quarantine for being exposed, or they're in quarantine because they've been exposed and now have COVID. And the majority of those have been exposed in the community. They're not being exposed at the hospitals, in the healthcare facilities, even though they're working with patients that have COVID every day. They are not being exposed to the point where they develop COVID. It's because of exposures in the community. So the message is, put on your mask. If you go to a restaurant or a bar and you see that they are not maintaining the 25% people inside the restaurant, keeping people 6 feet apart, then you should turn around and leave. That's the bottom line. You know, and I know some people have their COVID clique where they go to different places with these same people, but those same people may be around other people when they're not around you. And if they're around other people who have COVID, they can bring it back to the entire clique, and now it's spreading like wildfire again. So the best thing is really to just stay home as much as possible, go out when you have to, but eating out and going to bars, I realize that people miss that. But if the bars and the restaurants aren't maintaining the standards the way they should, then that puts the entire public at risk, and we should not be participating in that. We shouldn't be encouraging it, and we shouldn't be contributing to the problem of COVID spreading like wildfire through our state and across the country. And just so you know, Florida, who was worse than us way back when, they are in the 3rd worst category. So we are actually worse than Florida now, and that's concerning. But I am going there for vacation soon, so it's all good.
I just got to say, I admire your commitment to this vacation, no matter what. Having just come off of vacation, I feel it, because you still have to live, right? We still have to
You do.
go about our day-to-day life. And for a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
traveling, vacation, going to restaurants, it's a form of self-care. It's how they manage with the stress of the pandemic. It's how they manage with the stress of this election, right? And
Right.
so I'm
Right.
wondering, it hasn't been determined who our president is going to be quite yet, but based on just the COVID numbers and what you're seeing, do you anticipate us heading towards another shutdown?
That's hard to say because shutting down the economy is so hard and we know what works. So really, we don't need a shutdown. We just need people to do the right thing. Wear your mask when you're in public, stay 6 feet away from other people, and clean your hands often. And if people would do those three things, we know that it works. There was a study that was published by the CDC a few months ago of two hairdressers who both had active COVID and had symptoms, and they took care of over 130 clients, and nobody got COVID. And that's because everybody wore their mask the entire time, and they maintained their distance as much as possible. Of course, when you're doing somebody's hair, you can't really stay 6 feet apart, but if you have on your mask, that helps. And so if we adhere to the guidance and do what we know we're supposed to do, we don't need to go back to a shutdown. We just need to do the right thing. And so, for instance, when I go on vacation, it's going to be me and my kids. So we are taking up the center seat, but we are on Delta because Delta is not filling that center seat, only if you're together. So we'll be on there with our mask on. We will not remove our mask for snacks. Thank you for the snacks, but we are not taking off our mask to eat our snacks in the plane. We can eat them when we get to our condominium. I'm renting a car so that we don't have to ride in a bus or ride on public transportation with other people. We're going to go to the condominium, have our groceries delivered. It is a private beach so that we don't have to be around a lot of people. We'll have our private chairs on our little strip of beach. And that way we can protect ourselves, but also protect others. And so really, I plan to just go to the condo and to the beach and back. That's my plan, and that's the safest thing to do. And I have to take that extra step because my son is a special needs adult and he has a fragile immune system. Mm-hmm. And he had COVID pneumonia in July. And I honestly didn't know what was going to happen with him because he also has heart disease and kidney disease. And so he now has been quarantined to the house just to protect him. And so anytime we can get out and do something where he's not just stuck in the house, I want to do that. And this is his opportunity to get out, get fresh air. I mean, he walks around the neighborhood, but he doesn't go to his day program. I don't let him go hang out with his friends because his immune system is just too fragile. And so, for my state of mind and his, and my daughter too, because she's in college and she's like, we have to take a vacation. We are going on vacation, but we're going to do it in a certain way. I have little bottles of hand sanitizer that I've collected, and so we'll each have our own on the plane so that we can frequently clean our hands and make sure that we stay 6 feet away from people. And it can be done. You can go on vacation. You can go to bars and restaurants and be safe, but you have to do it the right way and you have to follow the guidance. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Yes, well, speaking of doing things the right way and going on vacation, yesterday was election day, and I actually left my family vacation early to fly back to Minnesota as a result of voter suppression. My intention was to mail in my ballot and have it be done, and I missed the deadline to do it, not because I missed the deadline, because when we had Secretary of State Steve Simon here on this virtual town hall, he said explicitly, as long as it's postmarked by election day, your vote will be counted. So that's what I put my money on, and that was a part of my voting plan, and it didn't happen. And I actually ended up having to fly back to Minnesota so that I could vote in person because my ballot wasn't going to be counted if I mailed it in time. So what I want to focus on is there are a lot of people who wanted to do the right thing, who have been social distancing, wearing their masks, practicing hand hygiene, by all intents and purposes, they are eligible voters within the United States or within the state of Minnesota, but their access and ability to vote was stifled through a variety of efforts. And so, Brett, I want to turn to you and ask you about some of the tactics and things that you observed over the past, I feel like just within the last week, like all of a sudden things started getting overturned, but maybe the timeline was longer than that. What do you think about the voting suppression efforts that have been?
It was masterful. I mean, and in the grand scheme of things, the um, the the tapestry was just, I mean, you gotta give them A for credit, A for effort.
Yeah.
And I know Ron would be able to speak to a lot of this as well. To hear things such as trying to, legally agreed upon processes to allow for the 7 to 14 days after. Again, state the state agreed to how we were going to count our ballots. And again, to have a federal judge overturn, last minute, last weekend, grand scheme of things, was just remarkable. Uh, and other places, the one that my favorite story came out of Texas, Houston, when they again trying to keep people safe through the process, COVID and everything else. Republican Party tried to just basically get rid of 112,000 votes because they came up with a solution to a problem to ensure that people can just drive it and do drive-up balloting, just as we have here, and where it is in most sensible places. But the Republican Party fought hard to, get that one out. That one was kicked back. And even the judge was like, really, this is what we're doing today. It was a lot of wasted time when it came to those type of practices and the tried and true stuff. We heard about the robocalls later on. Go ahead and vote on Wednesday, which was just remarkable. I mean, even I started to go. You start clapping after a little while. I was like, man, y'all are serious about trying to steal this one. But what it showed was that with all the tomfoolery and everything else, if the people do what they're supposed to do, all that stuff doesn't matter. I mean, at the end of the day, you can overcome any of those great hurdles, and it should show our community to the depths of how people are trying to take their vote away, their voice away, and how, and so it must be important. It must mean something to the society. When I used to work for the party myself, when we were doing our training, our national training, we started out, our first conversation was, this is the ability to run a multi-trillion-dollar organization and the people's lives. And that's very powerful. And what we don't understand too often in our community is that this is what we're fighting for every day. So, when you see these tricks that come up, sending out rumor, innuendo, bad information here and there and everything else, it's for a reason, to continue the control. This election was about the fight for democracy and supremacy. That's what it was. And I think at the end of this day, after all the ballots are counted, especially after what Trump did yesterday, again, last trick last night was stop all the counting. We're going to take this to the Supreme Court like they did with Florida back in 2000, if you remember that little episode. So, again, we're not falling for the okie doke. We're moving on. But we just have to be a little bit more vigilant and not be surprised every 2 years that there's an election, and get ready for it.
Absolutely. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready, right?
That's all it is. Stay ready so you have to get ready. Love it.
Absolutely. I want to ask Ron, what's your thoughts on how this election played out?
That's not a loaded question if I've ever heard one.
No pressure.
Here's the deal. I think for a lot of us, we were hoping for a landslide. I think for a lot of us, we were hoping for bigger margins, right? And bigger margins would mean that this would be a repudiation of Trumpism. It'd be a repudiation of all the things that we've seen over the last 4 years that has skyrocketed this man into power. And on the one hand, I'm a little sad because this election says a lot more about our country than I thought it would. That our country is very divided right now. And to ignore that as a fact, we'd be derelict in our duty if we ignored that as a fact. Something is going wrong about how we do our outreach. Something is going wrong about how we have our conversations. Something's going wrong about the fact that we have yet to paint a compelling enough vision for people to buy into versus pointing to something devastating and have them opt out of that, right? Those are all the things that I'm thinking about. I'm also thinking about the fact that we cannot ignore electoral politics. right? That it is up to all of us to stay involved in this work. That I've been sharing this all election cycle, and I hope that it continues to ring true. Voting is just the entry point into our civic engagement. It's not the entirety, right? We have to continue to vote, and we have to vote and boycott. We have to vote and march. We have to vote and unionize. We have to vote and strike. We have to vote and tweet. We have to vote and donate money, right? Civic engagement is not episodic. This is a lifelong commitment. And us as organizers, activists, leaders, whatever role that we play in community, we have to continue to talk about our involvement in that way. About the election specifically, we should walk with a little bit of confidence today after saying all that. Joe Biden has received more votes than any human being ever to run for office in the history of this country. That is a big deal. That means people woke up. That means people went to the ballot box. That means people made their voices heard, and all of that during a pandemic. So we should walk with a little bit of confidence. When I look at the election results themselves, Joe Biden is leading in all the states that are important for us to win, right? He's leading in, he's projected to win in Michigan. Wisconsin was already called for us. We took back Arizona, right? So the big prize, the big winner for us to pay attention to is Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania is going to take a few days to count those votes. As of last night, Joe Biden was down by 700,000 votes in Pennsylvania, with 1.4 million mail-in absentee ballots yet to be counted, coming from the biggest Democratic counties in the state. That is very good news, right? So if we count those absentee ballots that we've already counted, if those new ones that we count are reflected in the same percentage, we're going to win that state. After that, it's done. Trump has no path to victory in that thing. Number two, Minnesotans should feel proud of ourselves. We have the longest streak of voting for blue candidates in the country, right? We're on pace to lead the nation yet again in voter turnout, right? That is a very big deal, and we should be proud of ourselves. The city of Minneapolis broke its own turnout record last night. I don't have the hard count, but the old record was 219. With about 2 hours left to go in the polls, we had exceeded 225,000 votes in Minneapolis, right? Minneapolis is leading the state as it relates to voter turnout. We have to make sure that we continue to invest in these communities. So I say all that to say, we are in good shape to win the presidency, but no matter what happens, what's important to know is that, again, voting was just the starting line, right? The election day was the starting line, not the finish line. This is where we start our work, right? Our work is in between elections. It starts every single day with these conversations, breaking down every single barrier that exists to voting, making sure that people see themselves in our politics, making sure they see a vision that they can opt into versus opting out of, making sure that we get hip about the fact that these judges are important, that we turn the other side of the ballot and do our research. We got to make sure that people are running for city council. We got to make sure people are running for these roles and getting involved in the party and getting involved in things like ALF. Like, this cannot stop. And so I think our charge is, particularly as it relates to election, is to ensure that people know that we're not going to be liberated by one election alone, right? That our liberation was never on the ballot, and we have to remember that. It wasn't like we were going to show up on November 3rd, cast our ballots on November 4th and 5th, everything just goes away, right? We have so much work to do regardless of what happens in this election. The final thing I'll say on this is that we knew that this was going to take a while to count. Again, with record-breaking turnout, it's going to take a while to count those ballots. And there's some states that weren't even allowed to count mail-in ballots until the day of election day, which makes no sense to me. So we knew this was going to take a while. Stacey Abrams says this, and I love it. She says, the speed of the count of the vote doesn't matter. What's important is that we count every single vote. So anybody watching, make sure that we advocate that message. We will not stop counting votes. We need to advocate that we count every single vote, and we'll wait to call the election until the last ballot cast is counted.
That's really important. A few things that you said. One about, like, we should be proud of ourselves, right? Like, I'm sure all of us on this panel, as well as those who are watching from home, got out, did their civic duty, let their voice be heard, whether they, went to the polls directly or mailed in their ballot. This is not our first town hall talking about politics and how people can get engaged. We have been doing our work, right? And historically, our community, especially Black women, we show up to the polls and we do what we're supposed to do, right? And so I love that you named one, that in this moment, we not only get to give ourselves grace, but we get to give ourselves a little pat on the back and be affirmed that we're doing the work and that the work is good, right? I also love what you said about how our liberation is not on the ballot, right? And it makes me think about John Lewis's quote about good trouble that says, "Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful, be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. Never ever be afraid to make some noise and to get in good trouble, necessary trouble." And I think that's what we have really lived this year. One, not just because of the passing of John Lewis, but because we realized that sometimes doing the right thing, going against the grain, gets perpetuated as being a negative thing, right? Especially when your skin is melanated. You know, people are being criminalized for trying to vote. There are people who are being attacked for going out and canvassing or doing any type of like voter engagement, voter registration. But if there was ever a time to take that risk and to show up and to get engaged, it would be in this moment, even if you're facing opposition, right? And I think one of the things that I am seeing primarily on social media, but even within my loved ones who I've been checking in with, is a heightened sense of anxiety right now. It seemed like everybody was just kind of losing their stuff a little bit yesterday, and the marathon craziness has continued into today. People are overwhelmed, they're anxious. Stores are getting boarded up in Times Square, you know, in other parts of the country in anticipation for a presidential election. This is unprecedented. This gives the illusion that when you vote in the best interest of yourself and of your community, that you'll suddenly be put in danger, you know, or that there will be some huge outcry, you know, like a civil war is going to break out. I'm curious to hear from Ron, from Brett, from Adriene, when people say like, oh, something's going to happen as soon as the president gets announced, like, what is your response to that? How does that make you feel as an empowered voter, and what do you anticipate?
Yeah. You know what? I'll be quick on this one. Like, we should not be treating our national elections as if they were national emergencies, right? People are hunkering down, getting water. Home Depot is running out of plywood to board up people's windows and things like that. That is a reflection of the moment that we're in this country, right? That when we hear news of, you know what I'm saying? When we hear news of that, right? And Brett articulated this well earlier, right? Our votes matter. If our votes did not count, they would not be pulling all the stops out in the courts. They would not be pulling all the stops out at the Capitol. They would not be driving around with loud music and big flags trying to intimidate us. They would not be spending billions to convince us that our vote doesn't matter. They would not be spending money on robocalls to tell you to vote on the wrong day. They would not be spending money on sending you all this literature. They would not be spending money rushing a sham Supreme Court justice through a process with 8 days before the election's over with. What that should tell us is that we have a lot of power, right? We have a ton of power, and that if we channel that the right way, we can see a lot of that change. But we just have to be convinced of the fact that we do have that power.
And I think that other piece, I'm glad, Ron, you hit on the head. Again, it's another form of intimidation and to distort this whole conversation, to create this national panic. You know, am I going to go out? I mean, that's what was remarkable. The story that I have, and as Ron was hitting, earlier, the numbers were just overwhelming over this past 45, 46 days that we've been voting in the state of Minnesota, and for everybody with the early vote, that we had such remarkable turnout, that people saw through the BS and said, I got to go ahead and take care of my business, which was amazing to watch. But, and again, one thing that we're going to have to start to get a lesson on is that politics is a team sport. You know, this thing called the vote count is the scoreboard. And we have to realize that we have to learn how to count and coordinate with others in order to move our overall ideas. Again, as you know, Ron said, liberation did not take place today. You know, this was not the new Juneteenth today. You know, today is just another day. But at the end of the day is, how do I start to coordinate with others who see our common success and move on from there, and start to set the necessary platforms, tables, to have conversations to start to get over this craziness. Again, when I always look at, my ballots and everything else, I look at it from the standpoint of, if they're the incumbent, are we better off over the past whatever time that they've been in office, are they articulating, and it could be any party. I can, if there was a qualified and competent Republican that says that they can do it, I'll get behind that individual if that was the case. But the track record is kind of, hazy right now. The reality is that when we start thinking about our common interests and see our success within ourselves, with the LGBT community, with white suburbanites, with, rural Minnesotans or whatever it might be, we have to learn how to count. And I think what happened yesterday when Minnesota overcame all that craziness, people across the country, and again, just be patient. The numbers are going to run. You're also going to see something surprising, I think, out of Georgia as well. So when you just see yourself with your success and see each other's success, that's when the power really starts to take place. And that's when we can really create this more perfect union.
Well said. Adriene, how have you been emotionally, socially, now that we're in this waiting game, just navigating all things election related, especially because you carry all the information about COVID too?
Right. So I still had to do my little social experiment. I love to do those.
Yes.
So I took my son to vote yesterday. Me and my daughter voted early, but I did take my son yesterday, and I said, I'll use that as an excuse to see how they're doing. And I was comforted to see that people were maintaining their distance. Everybody had on their mask. Everyone, and you have to remember, I'm in the suburbs, so it may be a little different here, but everyone seemed to be in a, if not jovial, but relaxed mood. So that was nice. However, I do realize that where I live, there are a lot of Republicans. There are a lot of not happy Republicans. And I have to be mindful of the fact that things may be different depending on the outcome of the election. And so what I've done is, and I was telling them earlier, all the information and the updates that I have on the election, I got from Brett and Ron this morning, because I started trying to watch the results last night, and it just caused me too much anxiety, and I started getting heart palpitations. So I thought, I'm going to go back to watching Christmas movies, and I will get updates from other people who can constantly watch this and monitor it and give me updates. And so that is how I'm dealing with it. I have had to meditate this morning just to keep myself calm, because it's a stressful time. I mean, my son being special needs, all of the policies of the Trump administration impacted us in multiple ways, and so it's been fairly stressful for us over the last 4 years. And so, this morning I thought I should just stop, take a minute, do a little meditation, do some breathing exercises, just to relax myself and to relax my brain. I think once yesterday was over, the reality that it was over was like, okay, you can breathe now, but I need a little help with that breathing. And so that is what I have been doing. And my TV has been on Christmas movies all morning. I love the Today Show. And it threw me off because I wake up between 5:30 and 6 every morning. And when I woke up, it was already on. And that stressed me out, because I was like, well, where are my Carrie 11 people? They're supposed to be on. I want Carrie 11 news. I need the weather report, because I need it to happen the way it's supposed to happen. And it didn't. And that stressed me out just a little bit. So I turned it off, put it back on Christmas movies, did a little meditation, took the dog for a walk, and I'm loading up on water, staying hydrated so that I don't faint once the real results come out. And that's how I'm dealing with it. My daughter's in Iowa, and I will be transparent. I'm a little concerned for her. She's 20. She doesn't really still understand the weight of what's going on. I had to drive her to vote because she's a Bernie fan. And she was like, why do I need to vote? I don't support Biden. I really want Bernie to run. I'm like, okay, well, that ship has sailed. And unless you want 4 more years of Trump, you have to go vote. You don't have a choice. You can't live with me if you don't go vote. And so I drove her there, and she voted. And I didn't ask her how she voted, and they wouldn't let me go with her. But, she still doesn't understand the weight of it, because I told her, I said, I need you to be mindful of where you're going. you're in Iowa. I don't want you on back roads or other roads, after dark. And she's coming home Friday. And I did tell her, I said, I need you to come home, earlier rather than later, because I don't want you out there on that expressway or on the highway, and somebody rolls up in a truck or in a car, that sees you and doesn't like you because you're Black and decides to harass you. And she said to me, you think that'll really happen, Mom? And I'm just like, have you not been watching the TV? Did you not see where people in Texas in the Biden bus were just barricaded by cars? Do you not see New York being boarded up and Washington, D.C. being boarded up? These things are happening because it's a true reality that it may happen. And so I think our young people, some of them get it, but some of them are like my daughter. She still just, it just doesn't resonate with her for some reason. And so, I'm trying to figure out how I can make it resonate with her and her roommates and her friends so they get the weight of what's going on, because I just don't think they do. And I don't know what to do to make them get it, but we're going to bake cookies this weekend and put up the Christmas tree. And so all will be right with the world by Sunday.
Hey, you know what? That is perfectly fine. Somebody said Mariah Carey is somewhere unthawing, getting ready to sing All I Want for Christmas Is You for the next 30 plus days. And we can just be in the Christmas spirit. And maybe that's how we
Yes.
we get through the election. You bring up a really important point about the generational gap in the way in which we're all processing the election. And I'd love to address that a little bit more later on in this conversation. But first, I want to bring in another voice into this conversation, Linda Sloan, who is the Executive Director for the Council of Minnesotans on African Heritage. Linda, you are new in your role. So first and foremost, congratulations. But please
Thank you.
Please tell us about the council and then about your work.
Okay, great. So you're right. I am new. This is my 4th week, but I'm just so excited to be here. The council has a main charge of working with legislators and the governor to advise them on issues that relate to the African heritage community. So we also have to be aware of any legislation or statutes that's being put forward, so that we can understand how that's going to impact our community. We have a board of 12 individuals. Dr. Narita Hughes is our board chair, and we're involved in some of everything from the Child Protection Act in terms of the African American Family Preservation Act, Fatherhood Commission, of course, public safety is a huge one for us. What's going on with peace officer training, the opioid crisis that's happening in our communities. So we are kind of the group where individuals can come and just say, hey, this is what's going on in this particular space, and this is how it is harming our community. We can also serve as a bridge between state and government agencies regarding like healthcare issues or what have you. So I'm really excited to be in this role. You talked a little bit about generations. I'm on one side of the generation, the upper end of the generation. And sometimes we have where young people get engaged, they're out there as activists, but then some of the older people kind of go sit by the wayside. So for me, this was an opportunity to take the skills that I have and to utilize them to the benefit of our community. One of the things that I loved, a couple things, one that Ron said was, it starts with the vote, but we've really got to be engaged on so many different levels. What is going on with COVID? What's going on with healthcare? And we've got to get on boards and commissions because those are the people who are also driving the legislation. If we're not at the table, then we don't have an opportunity to provide our comments and our thoughts and opinions. And another thing that Brett said was just making sure we're able to reach across platforms. One of the reasons why I can't come on and say much about how I specifically feel about the election is because I have to make sure that I can reach across the party. We've got to be able to reach across party lines because, as Brett said earlier, I don't care whether you're Republican or Democrat, if you are going to vote for legislation that's going to positively affect the African heritage community. So we have a great opportunity to really make an impact. Love to connect with some of the community groups, because that's the first thing that I need to do, is to do my due diligence. Fourth week, I don't know a lot, right? But I will know, and I'm encouraging people to reach out to our office. Amber Jones, outreach coordinator, is fabulous, and you can reach out to myself, and hey, we're here to listen and then take those issues forward.
Yeah, shout out to Amber Jones. She was on our conversation that we had a few weeks ago leading up to the election, and she's amazing. And we have so many people who are doing good work. But you bring up a really important point, and that is sometimes there needs to be a little reaching across the aisle, reaching across party lines, right, in order to have the best interest of your community, interest group, organization, etc., to have their voices be heard and to have themselves be represented in whatever policy changes need to happen. Some of the people who have done so leading up to this election, particularly within the Black community, have caught a lot of slack for reaching across party lines or for daring to endorse a candidate who is not a Democrat, I'll just say. Ice Cube, Lil Wayne, so many other, 50 Cent. I'm curious to ask Brett specifically, who I know is also in the hip hop world as well as in the political world. When you hear about people reaching across the aisle or going into, traditionally, I'll say it like traditionally Republican and not inclusive, not inclusive party. When you see people trying to advocate, what do you think? Is that selling out? Is that wise political strategy? What do you make of all that?
Well, I'm going to say this, and I know some people ain't going to agree with it, and that's okay. Um, you do have to open up the dialogue, because
Mhm.
at the end of the day, when you're trying to pass legislation, either at the state or federal level, you normally need some participation from the other side, especially in our divided government and how checks and balances actually sit. It is what it is. I mean, prime example. We just one MN.org and many of our community partners with the Minneapolis Park and Rec just got something into a bonding bill. We worked with Republicans in order to make sure that things got done and brought monies in. Same thing with projects like Upper Harbor, Baldwin Square, whatever it might be. So, I mean, we have to be realistic about what this is all about at the end of the day. Now, what informs that conversation is, the parties, the groups that come together with those whole thoughts of this is what we believe in. Again, the Democratic Party is now the standard bearer as relates to try to ensure that all people have a place at the table. It's not the same thing from the Republican side. So when you have individuals, that are using their star power to try to open up dialogue, that's one thing. Now, let me say this bluntly as well, because some of y'all hip hop heads might be out there might not like this statement. I don't know what Ice Cube was thinking of. The Platinum Plan was pretty bad, and we need to stop coming up with crazy stuff too. It's one thing to come up with solid, activity. There's another thing to come up with that BS, that we can call it. Lil Wayne, again, was getting used by Donald Trump. Kanye 2024. I mean, that's what we're looking for next time. That's craziness. And that's this kind of stuff that needs to be kind of pushed to the side. But, with individuals like, people got on Jim Brown earlier on. I mean, I don't care what anybody else thinks. Jim Brown has been at the forefront of our society for so long. And quite honestly, Jim Brown was not well received by the Democratic Party for some of the things that he was trying to do. So he took his ideas to whomever would listen. And at that time, the president trying to carve out votes. And again, we got to remember at the end of the day, what is this about? Can I pull more people over here, to my side? And we have to be a little bit more cognizant of that. I got a question last night and part of one of our panel about, the concern. Is there a concern within the Black community that some Black males are starting to, drift over to the Republican Party or are may not be as excited about the Biden-Harris ticket. I was like, well, I had to remind the people, and again, they were Native people, but they were looking and honestly asking the question, and for the knowledge, personal knowledge, and I had to remind them, anytime that you get 80 to 85% of a vote, I think you're doing pretty well.
Mhm.
And there is a very strong foundation on where things are going. Now, does that mean that everything is all right? Everything is all gravy with this whole thing? I think myself, and I know Ron would say, we got much room of improvement as it relates to working within the Black community from the Democratic Party. And that's from party officers, from party senior staff, and everything else. But one thing that we have to do a better job of actually getting some serious people with some serious ideas to lead the conversation. So things such as Lil Wayne, Ice Cube, and Yeezy actually gets out in front of the bandwagon and go from there.
It's interesting that someone asked you that question, because I have also had that question about why does it seem as if some of our Black men within our community are voting according to their pockets and not the color of their skin. And I do think that's a really important context to name. And I personally, as an NWA fan, as an Ice Cube fan, don't fault Ice Cube for wanting to get us something, right? Because before this town hall is over, or tomorrow or next week, it could be announced that Trump is our president for another 4 years, and then what? So I definitely don't fault him for trying to do something, but I think my particular issue, as someone who sits in that unique intersection of being both in the hip hop world and in the social justice world and the policy world, is that our rappers and our athletes are not the only qualified Black people who can be at the table. And I don't see those other brilliant qualified people being invited into the room,
And just to remind people, I mean, to be fair, Cube actually took the plan to, he offered it to both sides.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it was Trump, of course, taking the opportunity because he knew he was trying to do it a certain way. I need to bring him in now and make an announcement. I mean, can't knock the hustle. Jay says it's best. But at the end of the day, if the Democratic Party would have said, we need to rethink this, we need to really try to figure out how to bring in basically 20 to 25% of our base vote and have that true dialogue, as opposed to what normally takes place when we always get the last minute flyers and everybody, promote the party and get on out there and vote, kind of approach. And again, those are the things that we have to work on. Again, as a proud Democrat, my family's been a proud Democrat all the way through, I'm very disappointed most of the times. And I think all our elected colors, elected Black people say it all the time. This is some BS sometimes.
Yeah.
But we kind of just keep marching on and everything else. But we're gonna also have to have a reckoning on that conversation as well. There has to be some type of focus to reimagine the relationship that is more fair and equitable and just.
Absolutely. And that's part of the public narrative that I've seen, particularly from people of the Black community, as it relates to this election cycle, and not what's happening on a state level, what's happening federally, right? And I have seen people really struggle to feel a sense of pride in their participation in the civic process in this particular round, even if they're people that typically are socially conscious and who typically vote, even in their local elections. They just weren't really motivated, or it was, yes, I'm going to vote, but I'm voting for democracy, not necessarily for these particular candidates, and I think that we're also going to see be reflected in the results. And perhaps that's what we're seeing right now. And the fact that the race is so close is, I took a road trip, let's say like a month ago, and drove from the East Coast to the Midwest and saw nothing but Trump flags and Trump lawn signs and things like that. And granted, middle America, right, that's kind of his space, but it was very eye-opening because I don't know many Biden fans or Harris fans or fans of that particular ticket or supporters of that ticket who are as gung-ho about that particular party and that particular ticket as the Republicans are for their ticket. And so I'm wondering, if you or Ron feel like that has played a role in why the election is so close right now. Is because Biden fans aren't necessarily, they're not even Biden fans. They're Democrats who just so happen to be willing to cast a vote for Biden.
I can jump in. I know Ron's going to come on a couple points on this. I think one, as Adriene pointed out earlier, her daughter is a hardcore Bernie supporter. I mean, Bernie brought some fire and brought focus and everything else. And this is again 4 years ago, 8 years ago, I was I'm a Biden fan. He had some mishaps here and there, but at the end of the day, this man's really trying to make some things happen. Just his character to do certain pieces is there. So I was fine with it 4 years ago if he would have jumped in. But, at the end of the day, however people got to the party, however people got to the polls, if it was a repudiation against Trump or defending the democracy or just sick and tired, being sick and tired, they got there. And that they were able to coalesce around Joe Biden, because the same conversation took place 4 years ago. And Ronnie, I think we talked about it even on our show, on Monday, that there is something else that isn't being talked about that issue of gender, that sexism issue, where most of our community didn't come out for multiple reasons. And so, the reality that we have to start getting down to is we have to really start to examine what do we really need. In one corner of our community, we talk about reparations. That's a noble idea and everything else, but you show me a path to getting reparations done and then to actually execute it from a public policy standpoint, there ain't much more that can be done after that point. That is the holy grail of everything, and it makes it very difficult. So we have to really start to understand what we are for instead of what we're against. I think that will start to drive some things up. And it's not about creating a new party and everything else. I know people would like to have the Black Party, but at the end of the day, if you can show me a district in the state of Minnesota, right now that is just purely Black, and you can win an election that way, all right, go at it. Go for it. But that's not how it works. It's 50+1 that always rules the day when it comes to democracy.
Well said,
brother.
Right?
I think you said it well. Yeah, you said it well, man. This is what I try to tell people, right? I think the Democratic Party, of which I'm a member, I serve on the highest levels of the Democratic Party. We need a different philosophy of change, right? And beyond the party itself, I think as it relates to civic engagement, period, we need a different philosophy of change. Instead of, because here's the image in my mind. You get elected, right? And you throw all these issues at people, working class people, people of color, people who are, with less housing stability, whatever the case is. And then we start talking about these big issues like climate change and the economy and healthcare. And they're like, wait a minute, I'm piecing together multiple part-time jobs to have a decent living, not even, halfway decent living. And then we excoriate them for not voting. We have to have a different philosophy of change here. We have to actually organize people. We have to actually politicize people, meaning instead of talking about the existential state of climate change, we talk about the fact that air in your neighborhood is worse than somebody else's air in another neighborhood. We talk about the fact that your water has a little more lead in it than somebody else's. We talk about the fact that you don't have access to parks the same as other people have access to parks, or whatever the case is, right? Like we have to shrink the change. We have to make the change more, relatable to people's real lives. Like I said, I'm a Democrat. I'm a proud Democrat. And that doesn't absolve the Democratic Party from critique. Even when we win this thing today, because I know that we will, it should have never been this close. In this calendar year, we've experienced a global pandemic where 250,000 people in this country, on the conservative estimate, have died from something that is not, we are smarter than this virus. This virus is not smarter than us, right? And we have refused to take it head on. In this calendar year, Donald Trump was impeached. Only the third president in the history of our country to be impeached in this calendar year. In this calendar year, Donald Trump was caught calling service members who were maimed or killed in wars suckers and losers. In this calendar year. In this calendar year, Donald Trump was on tape, recorded saying that he downplayed the virus, knew how it was spread, and then publicly said it was a hoax and publicly said it was spread in different ways. And yet this election was still close. So we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, what is going on? Why do people feel this disconnected to our politics? Why do people feel this? Why is there so much space between what's going on over here and what we plan to do about it? Why aren't we, what are they saying and what are we not listening to? Right? Who are to your point, Britt, who are the experts that aren't given the credibility as experts? I'm giving mad props to the organizers who have combed every corner of this country, identifying every single vote and every single voice that's been marginalized and ignored, and work to elevate their voices. How come they're not getting they're not getting the punditry on MSNBC on election night, right? They're the ones who are closest to the actual work, because they're actually talking to people. So we got to bring this stuff back down and talk to people, because guess what? Regular folks can see right through the ropey-dope, right? The second thing is that we have done such a good job, and when I say good job, I mean more effective job, at painting capitalism and wealth accumulation as positive characteristics, right? So you get a guy in office who says he's a billionaire, we don't see his taxes, whatever, and people in their mind say, oh, I can be that one day. If he's a billionaire, he must be smart, and he must be earnest, and he must be hardworking, and he must have good character. I must be able to trust him because he's been successful, because we've made wealth the epitome of success in this country. So you get, Trump is a weak man, strong man, right? He's a poor man's rich man. He's the guy that people think that they can be one day, because we painted wealth as something that's so important as it relates to success. So I say all of those things to say that we have a moment of reckoning here. We can't look at a presidential win today, because we're going to get one. I can't guarantee it, but I believe it, and the numbers support it. We can't look at that and say, whew, we did our jobs, right? We're done. We got this guy out. We're done. This is the starting point, right? We have to gut this whole thing out. People will start to support your party, and people will start to support your candidates when you show up in their lives every single day. When they see you on the streets protesting and marching and saying that their lives matter, people remember that. When you advocate for them at City Hall over a budget issue or over a land use issue or over a pothole issue, people remember that. When you advocate for healthcare that saved their family member or saved their daughter or saved them from some disease or some cancer, people remember that stuff. And the last thing I'll say on this, right? It is my opinion. This is not studied or this hasn't been verified, but I think that conservatives and Republicans do a much better job of two things than Democrats do. Number one, they do a much better job of understanding what their base wants and then reflecting that in leadership. Some of these guys know these policies are BS, but they know that their base wants them, so they're going to fall on the sword for their base. Number two, and this is I think some devilish stuff, they do a very good job of painting the other as the worst thing in the world, and that the means justify the ends, meaning that no matter what tactic we take, whether we rush a Supreme Court justice or try to take away healthcare during a pandemic or all these other things, no matter what we do, we're trying to protect you from them, right? And so their voters say, oh, this party's fighting for us. They're doing everything they can to save us from these radical socialist Democrats who want to rip out babies at 9 months, right? Like, they do such a good job at that. What we don't do, and we don't show our supporters that we're willing to fight as hard as possible and use every single tactic to reflect their values and to ameliorate their fears, right? That is something that we need to think about, and that is something that we can't do that if we don't understand what our base wants and needs and fears, right?
And I think that whole piece is they know how to count, because they understand the simple fact that their numbers are dwindling across the board. And they understand that 50+1 at the various things, they know how to play to win as opposed to just participate. And one thing that I know that I have a major problem with our party is we like to participate and be right. They want to win, period. So, and again, the way that we, the language I use as it relates to our friends to the right is that they channel their inner Malcolm X by any means necessary. So again, starting off our first question, those tricks of the trade that they were using by sending out robocalls and all that kind of stuff, by putting the division up. I mean, because you saw ads on how Joe Biden and Kamala Harris during one little tiff on a debate actually said, well, they don't like each other. Y'all need to vote for us. I was like, wow, that's remarkable that y'all even fixed your mouth. But they also understand that if I can pull off Lil Wayne or Yeezy or whomever else and get them to say, man, you got a MAGA hat on. Man, that's cool enough for me by any means necessary. And I don't think we really value I don't think we value from our communal standpoint our votes nor our place in this space. Because at the end of the day, if you don't, I love how James Garrett says this. If you don't have black people, you ain't got that dopeness, in the society. What's that flavor? You think about the whole conversation about jazz and all the other pieces that's going on with it. That's that piece that really has kept America connected, rock and roll and all those other pieces. But also the reality of the inventors that have come before us and all the great, you know, um, people who have put their lives on the line for this experiment called America. But when you don't have that dopeness at the table in real time, and again in the state, especially in the state of Minnesota, when you look at those margins, because when we pull off like just under 200,000 win vote last time around, that's black people. That's black vote right there. And when we don't realize that, when we don't ask for those things to the governor and to all those other pieces, when we forget that, that's when we're at a deficit. And so that's where I think we have to really start to get our mindset together to really start to say, one, we value us first, and we understand that we got a part to play in it, and that we got to play team ball with some others. And again, remember the whole adage, no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent solutions. So that's how we have to start to roll this thing from there.
Excellent. Speaking of solutions, I want to pivot to Linda and ask for people who do want to activate beyond this moment, regardless of the outcome and who becomes our next president, regardless of who our local officials are, for people who are passionate about policy and passionate about people of African heritage, how can they be plugging in with the council and getting more involved?
Okay, great. First off, they can just reach out to our office and let us know what their concerns are, what they believe their issues are, and we can have a conversation about how we can partner and how maybe we can get other state agencies to partner with us. They definitely need to connect with their legislators. So reach out to Senator Champion, Rena Moran, Representative Rena Moran. So make sure that you are in contact with them. Come to our policy summit where you can hear more about what we're doing and get engaged. We'll probably have a day on the Hill in January where we will have some legislative speakers and opportunities for the public to engage with them as well. But one of the key things that I mentioned earlier is get on a board or commission. And you can do that through the Secretary of State. I mean, there's 471 opportunities that our people can where our people can get engaged. So go to the Secretary of State. So it's sos.state.mn.us. Go to that website. The other thing is I'm hiring a legislative and policy director. So I'm looking to have someone from our community come into our office who can help shape what our legislative agenda is going to be. So if you're interested in that, you can just go to the state's website. If you need more information, just contact me. So that's kind of about it. Just like I said, just get engaged. If you want to just chat, I'm open to just chatting because I don't have the boots on the ground. My boots are going to be with the legislators. So I'm counting on you guys to know really what's going on in the trenches. And we're open to partnering on multiple levels.
Great news, great to know. And we'll make sure that the websites and the links get posted in the comments and in the chat box so that our viewers can access those more easily. Ron, I'm curious to hear from you on what is the solution? Where do we go from here? How do folks get activated, regardless of which direction things head in our country?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Again, I don't want to downplay voting, but I don't want to over romanticize it, right? That we have to get used to the mindset that there's likely an election every single year, whether it's a local, federal, regional, county, what have you. I'll echo what Ms. Sloan said about getting involved in a board or commission. I'm an alum of Nexus Community Partners Board and Commissions Leadership Institute. It's a training cohort that trains organizers and other folks in the community on how to both get on a board and serve on those boards effectively. And it's geared towards people of color and other folks in marginalized communities. If you want more information on that, let me know. It's a great program. I loved it. After that, I was put on a couple different boards, and I credit a lot of the effectiveness on those boards to that cohort. Another thing that you can do is get involved with some of these nonprofit organizations or these advocacy organizations, right? The ALPS of the world, the Urban League, some of these other places. Like, just by showing up and being around, we'll get a much better pulse on what's going on in the community and where you can lend your talents to supporting some of those efforts. I think critically about your own personal philosophy of change. What's the vision for this country? What's the vision for this community that you have for it, right? What are some of the skills that you can bring to bear to support that vision? Who are the people in your network that you can call that you can partner with, or they can point you in the right direction? I strongly encourage anybody listening to this to see themselves in elected office, right? Just to think about it, right? What would you do differently? What would be some of the policies that you would champion? How would you work with other people? If you can answer some of those questions and look and then see that other people aren't doing that, you're a good candidate to run for office, right? You don't need to be an expert in all things policy. You don't need to have watched The West Wing season 1 all the way through. You don't need a subscription to the New York Times or the Atlantic. Your lived experience is enough for you to represent the community in different ways. And so making sure that your perspective is valued there. And then, stay tuned on this election piece, right? Again, this is the presidential, but we're going to have some runoff Senate elections in other parts of the country. Georgia's looking at 2 runoff Senate elections. And you start to look at those things as well, using your dollars wisely. But really, what's really important about all of this is that the way you climb a mountain is step by step, right? We can't look at all the issues that are plaguing our community and think that we're going to tackle all of them all at once, or that we have to devote the entirety of our existence to alleviating some of those problems. Like, we're human beings. This morning, I didn't get much sleep last night. I was up texting, tweeting, trying to get the results, on the phone with the dean, just trying to make sure that we're up to information. Had a couple hours of sleep, and a friend texted me and said something about taking care of myself. And I went to a yoga session real quick, and I feel great, right? That you can't fill up other people's cups if your cup is empty. So part of the resistance is also self-care, right? That all this stuff is designed to discourage us, to throw us off our game, to overwhelm us, to make us feel like all is lost, to disillusion us from the process, right? Whether it's a pandemic or the incessant murder of Black men and Black people by police, or an economic recession, or the fact that our community has actually been in a state of emergency way longer than we've been in a pandemic, right? No matter what those things are, it's designed to make us feel like we have no ability to change it. It's designed to make us feel like we're stuck, and that all is lost, and we can't believe that, right? So part of the resistance is self-care, and that's what I would say. And then, more specifically, if people really want to get involved, make sure you put my social media handle up there, and my email and stuff like that. And I'm more than willing to talk to anybody. I get tons of opportunities for people to show up to, or donate to, or volunteer their time with. And I'm always looking for those opportunities as well. So let's make sure that we connect. You're on mute, sis.
There we go. Now we're back. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing those resources and those strategies. It's incredibly important for people to know that what happens today doesn't just stay here. This is a lifelong commitment to our wellness and our liberation as a people. And voting is one of the many ways in which we can all get more engaged and move our country forward. But it's not the only way. And regardless of who gets elected, there are elected officials who are voted in by the people, and it is their role, it is their duty to serve us, the people, right? So we also have an opportunity right now to hold our elected officials accountable. So I would also advise people to start paying attention to what did these people run on? What are the things that they said to get in office, to earn your vote, even if you didn't vote for them? It's still their job to hear the perspective of their constituents. I'll hear from Ron, from Brett, whoever wants to answer. How can we actually and truly hold our elected officials accountable? How do we begin to build a rapport, especially with our local elected officials? And, you know, if you're an everyday person and politics is not necessarily your cup of tea, but you care because you know that your Black life matters, because you see the craziness that's happening within our community. How can we do that in a tangible way for people, even if they're not, you know, politicians or the who's who of the community? How do they truly hold their officials accountable? I'll go to you, Brett. You're making a
That is
Oh, I mean, we still trying to learn that. So, I mean, we'll start there. You know, we have to remind ourselves that they people just like us. They have hopes and dreams and understand where they're coming from. They ran just as an individual, and quite honestly, in the representative democracy, they're our neighbors. They are our friends. Some of them are our friends. And we have to remind ourselves that they're going through the same thing that we're going through. They want to see their children get better, the house improve, and you know something a little left over at the end so they can retire and kind of move on from there. And we have to take the air out of the hall, as you know we would say. You know, when you get to those halls of power, we get a little freaked out by looking at the high columns and this, that, and everything else. It's just another place where people meet, have some conversation, and start figuring out how we're going to move things along from there. And once we remind ourselves that there's simple conversations between two individuals trying to improve their lives, you know, when we boil it down to that, I think we're in much better shape. We have been lucky because we've been able to pull together a great network and great group and everything else. And, you know, we have great friends across the board, but it started off with that first hello. Hey, how you doing? You know, let's go hang out. Let's go, kind of, going back to our Hoyts days, you know, sometimes, with some of our friends, me and Linda being able to connect, having those relationships back, you know, then to be able to think about our hopes and dreams, you know, while we were, you know, just able to decompress. So just remember that, and definitely take Ron's advice. A big shout out to all the folks that did run, Cedric Frazier, and Esther Badege, and Devonna Pittman, and all, you know, Ruth, who, and I mean, the numbers continue to grow. Rena winning re-election, Bobby winning re-election. You know, the numbers continue to grow because people are saying, you know what, I can do that. And then we have some friends that say, let me get behind you so you can do that. And then we keep it as simple as we keep pushing on from there. And just remember, at the end of this day, if you don't remember anything else that I would say, count and understand that this is a team sport. And that, again, if you can show me black land around in Minnesota, show it to me so we can actually win some elections. But other than that, we're going to have some friends across the board. We'll have friends that, you know, our brown brothers and sisters, our white brothers and sisters, whatever else. As long as they see the same thing that we see and we try to move it on, that's who you roll with. You make things happen from there. So build those relationships, start off with hello, and then, you know, continue to repeat. That's how you make things happen and hold them accountable, because nobody likes to be ran up on at the grocery store saying, why didn't you vote on something, Bobby? You know, that's happened. That's happened. You run into Bobby in the store and like, come on, Bobby, what's that vote for? That's how you hold folks accountable at that point in time.
It's how you hold folks accountable. And also, I think it's important to name, especially in 2020 and in the age of the internet, that our elected officials are human.
Exactly.
Who live full lives outside of their political careers, and they make mistakes and they don't know everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, regardless of how many plaques and degrees they have on their wall, they don't know everything. So if you're living a particular lived experience that the people in office may not actually live, and they may not have people in their network who live that, go into their office. Well, it's COVID now. Make a phone call.
Make a phone call.
Get on the internet, make a phone call. Let them know who you are. Let them know your story is valid, your experience is valid. And if there's someone in a position of power who can help make your experience a little bit easier, a little bit better, definitely let your voice be heard, and don't be afraid to do that. I want to ask Ron one final question before we do our wrap up. And that was, we talked about generational divides. And for me, as someone who, you know, with my sorority, we did a lot of like get out to vote efforts, right? And we always do. But where I feel like I could have done more in this particular election cycle is activated our new voters, our young voters, the just turned 18 voters, right? Or the people who historically just didn't vote because they don't really mess with the electoral system like that. There are plenty of people within our community who we just simply didn't reach. And so my question for Ron is, what can we be doing moving forward to really connect with those potential voters, and specifically through the DNC, what the DNC is committing to doing to, you know, you're young, college educated, ambitious, this is your work, brilliant, right, when it comes to policy and politics. But like, what about my cousin, you know, who maybe is a little more hood, maybe doesn't have a college degree, but has a vote? How can we reach them and make them feel like they're also a part of the Democratic Party?
I like the way you put that question, because it doesn't put the onus on us as a community to fix something that's wrong with us to adhere to the existing system. It's us looking at the existing system, how we can fix that to reach our voters. I'll say a couple things. Number one, when we think about young people, we got to give young people a reason to vote, right? We know that when young people run, young people vote, right? Like when you see someone like you in politics, you tend to participate at a higher rate. It is no accident how Barack Obama received so much support across the country, because so many people identify with his identities. And we need to make sure that we're continuing to run candidates who reflect the identities of the people that we're seeking to serve. I think number two, there are some practical things that we can do as it relates to reaching young people. I'm an advocate of introducing civic engagement as early as possible. I would love it if we did pre-voter registration at age 16, for example. Right when you go to get your driver's license or permit, driver's permit or whatever it is at age 16, that there's a pre-voter registration process so that when you do turn 18, it's automatic, right? You're already done, you can go and vote. I would love it if we made it just easier to vote and easier to register to vote. What if we did this, for example? What if we restored all the voting rights to those who had served for a felony, and similar to jury duty, for their first federal election, we pay them a stipend and have them watch an orientation video, right? This is your first federal election. It's your first time you're able to vote. 15-minute video. We're going to pay you $20 for your time. Watch this. Boom. Now you can go on, right? So like we have to introduce civic engagement as a little bit more tangible than it actually is and take action to make that happen. As it relates to young people, what if we just did automatic voter registration at age 18? Why we got to go through all this paperwork and do all these things? What if the day you turn 18, you're automatically registered to vote? They send me selective service stuff when I turn 18. They know when I would get my first credit card at it. You know what I mean? They know all that stuff. So you can also send somebody, you can automatically register somebody to vote, right? We need to make sure that we don't overly romanticize nor overly shame voting or not voting, right? I personally think voting is the most important first step that you can take as it relates to civic engagement, right? And I also am convinced that there's any method that you use for change is catalyzed by the vote, right? Across the country, we saw hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people marching in the streets in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. What if and I'm sure a lot of them voted and registered, right? But what if every single one of them on their way home from the march, grabbed them something to eat, filled out a voter registration card and put it in the mail, right? Later on, received their ballot in the mail, and then every single one of them went and voted. So now people who are making decisions are looking at this group, they're saying, not only are these people loud and disruptive and are shutting down highways, they can vote my ass out. Or they could run themselves. They could find their own candidate, right? So it's a double-edged sword. People are thinking a little more clearly, like, yeah, we can't ignore this community for too much longer, right? Not only are they making noise, now they're being surgical. Now they figured out how this game works. So we need to continue to elevate people's choices as it relates to how they want to make change, but make sure that we couple and compound it with voting. I think the third thing that we can do is that we have to remind young people of their power. We did the polling at the DNC. If young people voted at the rates of baby boomers, not only would we win every single election, it wouldn't even be close. It'd be a landslide. We would win every single election if voters age 18 to 40 voted at the same rate of those 60 and above, right? That is some power. And if we can convince people of that power, if we can not give them the ropey dope, not say vote or die or some of these other messages, right? Like we say, no, vote and, right? That you have power when you vote. And we can't leave any power on the table because look at the world that we're trying to live in, right? These other generations in so many ways have mucked things up. And we're going to leave some power on the table, right? And then people say, well, I don't like the candidates or I don't like the parties. These parties respond to the people that vote, right? That's just the nature of the game right now, right? And so the louder your voice is on the outside and you go and cast a ballot, right? We have to convince people of their power. The final thing I'll say in reaching some of these other generations or other groups is, again, we have to actually invest in them, right? Democrats took Arizona from Trump this year and everyone's like, oh, the Latino community came out and showed up. Yeah, but they were invested in for years in that state, right? They made sure that they organized, they made sure they put in money, they made sure they ran in as candidates, they made sure they did popular and political education, right? We have to do the same thing for every single other community, and it's gonna take a long time, and we can't do it just for election's sake. We gotta do it for community organizing sake. We gotta say, hey, guess what? We do have an election coming up, but know what else we got coming up? People have bills on the first of every month. We gotta make sure that, we're opening up economic access so, we can afford this housing. Oh, look, they're proposing this new development down the corner. Here's what this actually means. And here are the signs that you can look to for gentrification or displacement, right? We have to break all of this down so people can see themselves having agency in our system. I think people don't participate because they don't see the clear connection between their agency and outcomes, that we've made them feel so small that they don't think that their voice matters. They don't think that their vote matters. In this state, we have had statewide elections that were won or lost by 2 votes per precinct. Not by county, not by city, literally 2 votes per neighborhood across the state. It's how close some of these elections are. Your vote and your voice matters and it's powerful. And then for the rest of us who are receiving those votes or who are in leadership or have some sort of role leading community, we have to reflect and respond much better than we do, right? It ain't just about us and our title and how smart we are, how connected we are. It's about how well we can reflect the needs of the community that we serve. It's about how well we can respond to some of the needs that the community is facing. It's about how best we can ensure that even if they're not physically at the table, when I show up at the table, they see community through me, right? That it ain't Ron Harris and his ability to whatever. It's Ron Harris backed by all these other people that sent him there, right? That's the onus of us as leaders. And I think when people see that kind of leadership, I think they're gonna be like, all right, this is a system I can participate in. This is something that I can actually engage in because it's not a waste of my time. My vision is reflected. My values are reflected. I see where my agency lives in this. I have power. Oh, I'll vote every year. I remember when I first figured out that I had some power. 18 years old, 2008 at Hampton University, door knocking and organizer for Barack Obama. That year we flipped Virginia blue for the first time in 44 years. Right, a bunch of HBCUs organized around the state of Virginia and helped turn that state. After that, I was like, oh, we got power, right? I'm a student, right? I just got to this state. I'm 18 years old. I got power. I actually helped not only flip the state of Virginia, but elect the first Black president of the United States. I'm never skipping an election after this, right? We have to continue to create those kind of moments so people see their own power in our systems.
Absolutely. So
and then make sure that we change the systems if it doesn't reflect that. And so they see us trying to change those systems on top of it. Right?
Yeah.
That's where we build trust.
There it is. And of course, anytime Obama's name is on it, whether it's Barack or Michelle, I think you can get a couple more young people and a couple more people of color out, right? In the interest of time, I want to give everyone just a chance to tell people where they can be found. Linda, where can people find you and get connected with the council?
You could reach me at linda.sloan, the number 1, at state.min.us. So it's pretty long. Just go to the website and you'll be able to find me. Just click on the link.
Perfect. Well, Linda, congratulations once again.
Thank you.
So exciting to have a Black woman in this role, and you're incredibly fit for the job. The council has been doing great things, and we look forward to seeing what you do next and being a part of that process with you all. So thank you.
I'm excited to be here, and I will be connecting with each of you.
I look forward to it. I absolutely look forward to it. Let's see here. Brett, tell us, where can people find you?
Yep, you can check out our website, www.one, the spelled out, mn.org. We're changing the website, so don't look too hard at what you see right now. It's going to change in a couple of days, but it gets you to where we're at. And then my email directly is Brett, BRETT, the number one, MN at gmail.com. Excuse me. So yeah, just we're ready to serve. We're moving things forward. We've been blessed over the past couple. Keep it moving from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. Please keep up the great work. Ron, I think we shared your information earlier, but just in case, you want to tell us where people can find you?
Yeah, so on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or Gmail, my username is Ron Harris, RonHarris, MN. Ron Harris MN at Gmail, Ron Harris MN at Twitter, Ron Harris MN on Instagram, Ron Harris MN on Facebook.
Consistent branding. I'm here for it. Thank you, Ron. Appreciate you always. Keep up the great work. And last but certainly not least, Adriene, I have a feeling you don't want to give out your contact information, but maybe some info on.
I do be found. No, I'm just kidding.
Maybe some COVID info for the people. Where can they get tested? All that good stuff.
You know, the Minnesota Department of Health has added a ton of free testing sites. They now have the saliva test that is available. So I recommend people go to the Minnesota Department of Health website and look at their COVID page. And there are places all over the state where you can now go and get free testing. And you don't have to have insurance. You don't have to have money. You can just go get tested. So I would check the Minnesota Department of Health website because, like I said, they're all over the state. And so it's too many to really list here.
Perfect. Well, Adriene, thank you for everything that you do. I hope that in 2 weeks you can report that the numbers are going down and that we've been doing good. But regardless, we know that we're going to hold ourselves accountable to practicing hand hygiene, social distancing, and wearing our mask. We're also going to hold our elected officials accountable and continue to activate beyond this moment. I hope this conversation has inspired our viewing audience to do so and to recognize that their votes are not in vain, that it is okay to be unsure of what exactly is going to happen moving forward. But we know at the end of the day that Black lives do matter, that we do have allies across the aisle who are going to work in our best interest, and those who choose not to will be held accountable, right? The work is not done here. It's just actually beginning, but this town hall is ending. So I want to say a very special thank you to the Minneapolis Foundation, North Point Health and Wellness, and Children's Minnesota for making this town hall possible, as well as our partner organizations who come together and produce this town hall: Insight News, the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder, and Minnesota Community Care. Make sure you join us next time, Wednesday, November 18th, for a live broadcast on mental health, COVID-19, and what to expect for the 2020 holiday season. This will be broadcast right here, same place, same time, on the African American Leadership Forum Facebook page and YouTube channel. My name is Brittany L. Wright with Insight News. Thank you all so much for your time, for your diligence, and for letting your voice be heard through the vote. Take care of yourselves, and remember that joy is an act of resistance in itself, and is another way that we can take care of ourselves and our community as we wait for these election results. Take care, everyone.